Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, I'm up to you. It's good to see you on Tuesday. It's election day. It's my daughter's birthday. Hey, happy birthday, daughter. How are you? It's a, Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout. My takes on all things considerable. Yeah, we talk about things that from a perspective that is unique. I mean, how many people are talking about the news inside a closet in front of a gong? Very unique. We talk about the news. I'm a veteran news guy who's won some awards. Okay, not the Pulitzer, not the Nobel, but RTNDAs and a couple of local things. I don't want to put it down. I mean, they are awards. Some even came with money. $5,000. That's half a Pulitzer. Pulitzer only comes for 10. That was quite an award. I mean, when I won that AAJA Civil Rights Award. But anyway, look, I'm not here to brag. I'm just here to say I am here for you on what I call the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and all the rest of us, the ALLs. You don't have to be Asian. I mean, I was speaking English. But I talk about the news from a perspective you rarely get. And that perspective is worth noting on today of all days, the Day of the Dead. It is that, but it really is the day of the voter, who hopefully aren't dead. You can't mix the two. You can't, it's got to be, you're either a voter or you're dead. Although in the case of my father, he loved to vote. He's dead now. But let's not confuse matters. It's the day of the voter. If you haven't voted yet, and out in the East Coast, it's like 5 o'clock, go out and vote. Go out and vote right now. Take your iPhone. If you're listening to me on an iPhone, just go out and vote. It's important to vote today. If you're in New York, if you're in New Jersey, if you're in Boston, they could elect an historic first, an elected female Asian American. That would be historic. They had an appointed black female mayor who didn't win the runoff, and now Michelle Wu could be history, or she could make history. The first female Asian American mayor of Boston. That would be something today. Actually, there's mayoral races all over the country that involve Asian Americans. I'll talk about a few of them today. But today's a time to vote. And here's the thing. It's not really about the people you vote for. The people you vote for, they want to be public servants. And what does that mean? The public servants, who do they work for? Us. The public servants work for us. That's why when some people say, Emil, you had the opportunity to work in, you worked in Congress as a press secretary, you worked in, for politician, you've also worked in news, you've covered politics, you've thought about maybe running for office. I mean, the thought may have crossed my mind about maybe 20 years ago when I had a friend who ran for school board. But here's the thing. The people with the power aren't the people who stand in front of the podium and talk and cast the vote. Because remember, it's a representative government. The people with the power are the people who they don't pull a lever now in a voting machine, but the people who cast the vote. The voters have the power. You are the ones with the power in a democracy. But you have to care, you have to go out there, you have to know it matters, and you have to vote. So if you haven't voted yet, wherever you are in the country, in Boston, in New York, big mayoral race there. In Cincinnati, that's East Coast. In Chicago, in Texas, in I want to cover the time zones. In the West Coast, the voting up in Seattle. Vote. It's your power. The people you're voting for are public servants, and you are the master. Remember that. You have the power. Exercise it. It's not just it's called the right to franchise. It's called this right to vote. But the way I see it, the best electeds know they are public servants. This was the problem with the last guy high up. He thought of public servant and he thought of, I'm not cleaning anyone's bathroom. That was his problem. Mr. No Empathy. President No Empathy. But if you think about it, the best public servants, the best public officials, they know who's boss. They know who they are beholden to. And it's not the big moneyed interest. It's not like the people who write the big checks. It's the people who, you got to love those candidates who say, look, I'm only accepting $3 donations or $25 donations. There's going to be a limit because I'm not going to be beholden to big money. This is why that's appealing. The people who talk to people, the candidates who know they are public servants and that you out there are the master in this great thing we've got going, our democracy. So exercise your right today. Go vote. It happens to be Day of the Dead, but they can't vote. It's the day of the voter. Go out and vote right now. Lots of good issues, and there's some races I'm following. The biggest one in the country is the gubernatorial race in Virginia. Everyone seems to want to follow that. And that's because they think it's going to be a harbinger for everything else that comes down the pike. I don't know if that's true. But I think it really depends on how local the race gets versus how national. If it's a national thing where, it's all, well, you guys like Trump and you guys don't like Trump. If it's that way, then it could be a harbinger. But if it's totally local, and it seems to be that way, where they're making it into something about school boards and what parents have a right to tell school boards they can, that public education can teach or not teach your kids, which is really kind of, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me because they're bringing things like critical race theory, which isn't taught in the schools. I mean, that's a college level thing that you're not going to get K through 12. So they've managed to try to find the local hot button in Virginia. And who knows? It can set off a kind of a wave. Like I said, could be the harbinger of things in all elections subsequent. If some people think, oh, that's the way to win, or that's the way to win back the House or keep the House, whatever side you're on. Anyway, people are looking at the McAuliffe-Youngkin race. And if you're Asian American, you've got an interest in this. If you're Asian American and live in Virginia, the northern Virginia suburbs of D.C., or if you're Asian American and live in the Norfolk, Hampton Roads area, or live in the state capital, Richmond, Virginia, big race there. So if you're in Virginia and you haven't voted early, because a lot of people have already voted, right? But for some of you stragglers who say, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. I don't know if I want to, mark a ballot today. Some people think it's a matter of, well, not many people are very excited about voting today. I don't know. I don't think it's a matter of how excited you get about the issues, how excited you get about any one particular candidate. Although there are some exciting candidates to vote for. Michelle Wu in Boston. If I were in Boston, she would be a candidate worth getting excited about. But it really is, how excited are you about this thing that, by virtue of being an American citizen, you have the power? It's your power. Take back the power to vote. Get out there. Now, I got one daughter in New York, and she said, Dad, I didn't register until they don't have safe. She moved late. She doesn't have, New York doesn't have same day registration as some other states, which is too bad, which is just another one of those issues that those who want to prevent people from exercising their franchise, from exercising their power, they like to put that in. Now, in New York should be liberal enough so that they should have same day registration, but they don't. But anyway, but she's doing something anyway, helping out, get out the word, helping others get out to vote. So I hope you realize today, voting day, election day, it's your day. Go out there and flex your muscle. I just flex my, if you're not watching me, I'm flexing my muscle. Okay, so that takes care of the voters. The voters vote, and the dead, they stay dead, they don't vote. Okay, today's the Day of the Dead, November 2nd. It's a big, big deal if you're from Mexico, where they put on these elaborate costumes and masks. And I just noticed I had a coffee mug that I bought up in Portland that had a skeleton. It was like a Day of the Dead coffee mug, one of my favorites. But their altars, they make these little altars and they remember the dead. And this year it's kind of special because there are a lot of dead people. Now, you don't have to be Mexican to celebrate the Day of the Dead. In fact, if you're Asian American, all right, I'm Filipino, Catholic, Day of the Dead, All Souls Day, remember the names. Remember the names. Remember those who have passed, those close to you. And, you know, there are always favorite names, favorite people that you address that you say, oh, yeah. It's like concentric circles, right? Those really close family, mother, father, sister, brother, close friend. And then you just go out, acquaintance, strangers, all the dead, right? At some point, it's like, it's everyone who has passed on. We remember them. And because of COVID, right, 5 million around the world, because of COVID. In the U.S., over 700,000 just because of COVID. We take a second to honor, remember, and to just mark a space for them. You have your names. Speak them. Speak them now. It's their moment. I'll start out with friends. Last year, before the vaccines, can't forget my friend Corky Lee. You know, there isn't a day that goes by. He was so active and so in your face about getting issues out, about his favorite issues, Chinatown, Asian Americans, you name it. I'm on the West Coast. He's on the East Coast, but he seemed like he was always in touch over the last year on Facebook to let people know what the issue was. And then he dies in January before the vaccines were all approved. If you have COVID deaths to think about them. Corky's mine. My other relatives who died under COVID, I don't know. I can't say for sure it was COVID, but they had the underlying things that exacerbated their health issue. They were in the hospital at the time when hospitals were under siege. Did COVID not have an impact on their life? I think it probably did. I remember those relatives. And then, of course, those close to you, your mom, your dad. I mean, I've been thinking about my dad and my mom all month, all October, because of Filipino American History Month. And yesterday we talked about the colonization of the Philippines that was pretty much, well, we talked about the connection between the University of California, Berkeley, and how scholars and even the ninth president of the university, David Prescott Barrows, were part of the U.S. government in the Philippines. Barrows was the education czar, the head of education there, who told the young Filipinos he taught, you're illiterate, you're inferior. Here's English. Learn it. That's colonization. That's why Filipino students, Filipino community, and their allies were protesting at UC Berkeley last week, because there was a museum exhibit that glorified Barrows. No apology has come forth by the university or the museum. But these are no less sensitive than, what to do with Robert E. Lee on a horse. You take him down. UC Berkeley took down Barrows' name, but then why did they honor him in this museum exhibit just last week? Anyway, go to my column at aldef, aaldef.org/blog, read more about that. Or you can go to theinquirer.net, the PhilippineInquirer.net, because it's not over. An apology should be forthcoming. Anyway, I think of my dad because he was one of those kids who was told, you're inferior. Here, learn English. And he did. But they talk like this. He had accent. That's my dad. That's what I heard. It's ingrained in me. And I remember him on the Day of the Dead. My mom, too. I don't want to give short shrift to my mom. I talk about them both in the one-man shows I do. But you talk about all these people who are close to you. Start close, go out far, expand, include them all of the dead. Day of the Dead. It's not just a Mexican-American holiday. It belongs to all of us. And if you're Catholic, hey, it's All Souls Day. Pray for all those souls. All right. I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. We do this show, Emil Guillermo's Takeout. Like I said, my takes on all things considerable. And I want to talk about this next story because when you saw this story, there was a little mention of it today on the Today Show. I saw just a little blip. And they showed a picture. This is the air suspect who caused a ruckus on an American flight. It's just one of the reasons why there was chaos over the weekend with American flights being canceled. But, this is not the first time there's been a kind of ruckus on an airplane during the last month or so. The latest stats show there's more than 5,000 instances, real violent type things. But when someone has caught a cell phone image of a perp they usually have been these burly white guys or some kind of burliness, right? Sometimes there's some mostly they're unruly white guys who like are like anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers. Oh, you're not going to bother me, kind of thing. But so this is the second day of the story because it happened over the weekend, and then today on Tuesday, I catch a glimpse of the person who was arrested. Now, when they first showed him, say on Monday, talking about it, they blacked out his face. I couldn't see. He looked kind of slight. I said, well, maybe it's a skinny white guy, anti-vaxxer. Today, they removed the blur off his face, and it's an Asian guy. Brian Shu, who's all of 20 years old from Irvine, California. He had his court date almost immediately on yesterday, Monday. And he's got a public defender. And here's the thing. I think I don't want to see this guy railroaded. Brian Shu. He went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, or he went to the, where'd he go? He went to U.S. District Court. They set his bond at $10,000 yesterday afternoon, Monday afternoon. Charged with interference with a flight crew and assault within the special aircraft jurisdiction of the U.S. I just hope they don't throw the book at Brian Shu. And I hope he gets a better attorney than the public defender. No knock on the public defender. I just think that the public defender may not have the kind of savvy that a criminal attorney, this is the thing. You buy your justice in America, right? I'm not saying the public defenders aren't good, but I just hope he gets the kind of representation he needs to beat this. Because we should look at the Brian Shu case and make sure it's not used as the thing that scapegoats all these 5,000 instances of airplane violence that have existed during the pandemic. Now, this attack that supposedly happened occurred on October 27th on American Airlines Flight 976 from JFK to John Wayne Airport in Irvine. And it happened, it was diverted to Denver. They disclosed the affidavit in the case and said that Shu was returning home after he underwent brain surgery. All right. Brain surgery. So the mother was on the plane with them, and she's a witness. She didn't say anything. There are other witnesses who say things like, well, a flight attendant told Shu to stay away and punched her in the face with force so that the steward or the flight attendant hit a lavatory door. But another witness said it looked like he had a practiced, quote, practiced or trained punch, like he was a martial arts guy. And he recalled that the victim said, I have a fractured nose. So these are kind of damning things. Flight attendant said she saw the defendant go to the bathroom and was struck by Shu. This is what the witness said. Shu didn't apologize, said he needed to go to the bathroom. The flight attendant said, the fasten your seatbelt sign is on. You got to go back to the seat. But then that's when the altercation happened, and one of the witnesses said that he charged her, flailing his arms, and then another flight attendant came by to intervene. Look, all this is in the affidavit. Victim said she was stunned, and she reported the assault then to her co-flight attendants. And then Others came and helped to restrain Sue. They put duct tape and plastic bonds, the Ziploc type things. And thing is, if the guy is coming back from brain surgery and is being accompanied by his mom, he's in an impaired state. I think that should call for a certain amount of, a certain amount of leniency. I just don't think this is the case to go and make or set an example for the 5,000 instances that have happened up in the air. And I just hope for Brian Chu's case that he gets the defense he deserves. If in fact it's true, he had brain surgery, came back, he wants to go back, and he wants to return back to school in New York because he was just coming back home after the surgery. I just hope that there's a better understanding about what this guy was going through. The mother said something to the effect that, well, since the brain surgery, he hasn't been himself, and he sometimes feels under siege. So it's just a shame too that they removed the blur from his face, so now you see him. And I just think that given the circumstances, he shouldn't have done what he is alleged to have done. That shouldn't have happened. That's wrong. I think a little sympathy is in order for Brian if he's coming out of brain surgery. For goodness sakes. Anyway, of course, on the Today Show, they cover the story as a 10-second blip in an overall 2-minute package on the problems that American Airlines had. And you don't get the detail about the brain surgery or the fact that this guy, Brian Chu, they mentioned his name, they showed his face. You don't get any sense that he was somewhat impaired coming off brain surgery. So another reason why I think, it's important for me to say this or to use this story now and to let you know this, because my goodness, 20-year-old kid. I just hope they show a little bit of leniency for what happened. And they don't, as they say, throw the book at him. We'll be following. So right now, a lot happening with the climate talks. It's significant. I said yesterday, look, if you don't think the climate is really affecting you, look, I live in California. The fires, when the fires happen, right, that's because the brushes and the trees they're all dry. It's hot. It's too hot. A spark goes off. The fires happen. Smoke's in the air. I live 300, 400 miles away from where the fires were. I could sense it. I can feel it. In fact, that smoke from the fires went eastward, and people in New York were dealing with our smoke. Climate change affects us all. And they're finishing up in Glasgow. And it's really ridiculous because the Chinese and the Russians weren't there. And and you don't get anything from the biggest polluters on CO2, right? If Chinese and the Russians aren't there. And nothing's forthcoming from the Chinese, the Russians, and the Indians. And the only ones coming out on CO2 are, the U.S., because Biden is trying to show some kind of leadership here. I will say this, that the U.S. did announce a significant cut on emissions of methane. And it's important. It's the beginning, right? Because methane is, they call it the second most important greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide. It has a stronger warming effect than CO2, but it's also much more short-lived in the air. So good and bad, right? You still have to address it. But CO2 is the most important thing long term. Well, if we want to start seeing results now, you got to deal with the methane. So the U.S. aiming to cut methane emissions by targeting leaks from oil and gas facilities. This is all important. So it's not like totally like nothing's happened. We're moving forward. But remember, we don't have much time. We don't have much time. So the climate talks, and then of course, Biden ends one of his media opportunities talking about how the Build Back Better, how the infrastructure deal is going to come through, despite what West Virginia coal and gas senator Joe Manchin said. He said, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Look, this is part of the politics. This is why a lot of good people don't like politics. But remember what I said earlier. You have the power. These are your public servants. You are the puppet master. They're your marionettes. They can do your bidding, not the bidding of the money or the corporate interests, but the people. That's the way it's supposed to work. You're the master. But a lot of people have just given up and said, let someone else deal with that. And the more you do, the more the corporate interests swoop in, and the more they control the public servants. Got to avoid that. And the only way you do is if you get out there and vote. We talked about Virginia a little bit. I don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, I know some people in Virginia Beach. I think I know where they're voting. But it's going to be close. And like I said earlier, if it goes local, it may not be really as relevant to other places. For example, in the California recall, that was essentially nationalized. Everyone in California, generally speaking, loved Newsom. But as soon as you nationalize the race and you make it a kind of a, well, are you for or against Trump? Well, then the Trump voters siphon off and create the divide. And that's what gave all the, the 42 candidates who were trying to replace Newsom, that's what gave them some power. The fact that it was a national race, because if it was totally local, totally, to California, Newsom would have won by another landslide, just like he won in the first place when he got elected, governor in the first place. So apparently in Virginia, the nationalizing hasn't worked, but the localizing has. And maybe the local issues are just proxies for some of the anxiety that white people have. That's what I see it as. It's white anxiety over, what are we going to teach our kids? Are we going to teach them that America was built on racism? Are we going to tell them that there's a lot of racists who are in our institutions? Are we going to tell them that Alexander Hamilton was owned slaves before he owned hip hop lyric book. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until Lin-Manuel Miranda, gave Alexander Hamilton hip hop lyrics that Hamilton became cool. But he was married into a slaveholding family, the Schuyler family, well-known slaveholders in New York. But that's an inconvenient part of history that people don't, they want to like forget. It's all kind of interrelated. Just like when I talked about the Filipinos, people don't want to talk about how the UC president, David Prescott Barrows, was a colonizer, which, really is like, colonization is like slavery, but with no chains. They just have you kind of virtually by law, by the piece of paper that says, oh, well, we're the imperial power here. We own you. No chains needed. You're colonized. I'm looking at some races to look at. If you want to look at around the country today, there's a guy in Cincinnati. Now, I know Cincinnati a little bit because some of my in-laws live there. But get this. There is an Indian Tibetan American running in Cincinnati against a longtime politician and two-time mayor, David Mann, who's 82. Now, talk about generational and, race and, all the demographic things. This guy, Aftab Puraval, he's 39, Indian and Tibetan, and he's running against David Mann, who's 82. And I don't know. Puraval is currently the county clerk's or the county clerk of courts for Hamilton County. He's got a good chance to win. But when you're a 39-year-old Asian American running against an 82-year-old white guy, David Mann, former two-time mayor, that is really tradition versus the new demographics. And I'm going to be looking at the mayoral race in Cincinnati between Aftab Puraval, Indian and Tibetan, versus David Mann, an 82-year-old two-time former mayor who, can you just see, he's just trying to hold up the tradition of a white Cincinnati. Hey, we're part German. Come on, this is our place. I just wish the best to Aftab Puraval. And then in Seattle, you got Bruce Harrell, 63, Japanese and black. He's running against Lorena Gonzalez, who's the current president of the Seattle City Council. Bruce Harrell is a former city council member. And that could be a close race. Harrell is 63. Gonzalez is 44. That's an interesting race to look at. And the Asian American community in Seattle is strong. If you've ever visited the International District in Seattle, it's significant Asian communities. So look at Bruce Harrell in Seattle. And then, of course, I mentioned Michelle Wu. She's 36. Quite a story. Here's the thing about Michelle Wu. She's running against a fellow city council member, Anissa Isayabi George. So George is 47, Michelle Wu 36. Michelle Wu has a tremendous shot In fact, she's ahead in the polls by double digits. But you still got to vote. You still got to go out there. And a lot of people are saying, oh, there's going to be such a low turnout because people look at the polls and say, oh, it's not worth going to vote. Michelle Wu's going to win. Maybe not. I mean, this is something that benefits all the candidates. You just go out and vote and don't listen to the polls. But a lot of people only will vote if they are mad or if they're angry or, you got to get the emotion in there. And I don't know if it's enough that, first Asian American woman, first woman elected. Although maybe first woman elected, that would get people excited to vote. I just hope that people don't stay away. You need to understand that this is your power on election day. This is your power, whoever you vote for, the Asian or the non-Asian. Got to get out there. Got to get out there and vote. Got to get out there and vote. Let me also mention a shout out to a good friend. Well, a decent friend. I like the guy. I've met his wife, Candace. I've met his son, Lucas. Congratulations to David Chu. I misspoke. I said that, he left the assembly to be city attorney. He took over the city attorney's job yesterday on the 1st. But I said that he didn't have to run, but it's an elected office. So he's going to run. But, here's the thing in California, because of term limits, the politicians or those in the political class just go from job to job. I mean, I saw a picture of Rob Bonta, the attorney general, who was the assemblyman, walking with David Chu in a tweet. He said, here's my good friend, David Chu. They knew each other from the legislature, the assembly. But you got to switch. You got to move around. It's like, so it becomes a kind of musical chairs thing. So I was wondering, why did David Chu leave the assembly? And then, maybe it's because more power at the city attorney's office. Maybe you don't have to run. But I was wrong. You do have to run. But here's another fact. He was only making about $115,000 as an assemblyman, which is what a decent insurance salesman makes, which is totally, out of sync for what an assemblyman should make. But as city attorney, he's making something like $270,000. So he got a pay raise. And he gets to do the kind of work that I know he loves to do as a litigator. And I just know he can work for the civil rights of San Franciscans. And I think that, you're an executive role, not as a city attorney, not the legislative role. That's why the pay is as high. It's the city and county of San Francisco. So I wish my friend David all the best. Now, here's an example of a guy who I met years ago. He wasn't in office. But this goes to what I was saying earlier. You go into politics because there's a calling. You go into politics because you feel called. And you feel called as a public servant. So I admire David. I've followed his rise when he first ran for supervisor of San Francisco, and then the assembly, and now city attorney. He is carving his career. And it's interesting. I talk about David Chu, who is from the Boston area. He went to Harvard and Harvard Law, kind of like Michelle Wu, who's from Chicago originally, and then went to Harvard and Harvard Law and found herself running for city council and being an advocate. And here's why people run. Because they deal with the system and they find that they can improve the system, or they find that there's something wrong with the system. Like in Michelle Wu's case, she was running a coffee shop and she saw how things were screwy. And she was trying to, from a small business perspective, not necessarily an Asian American civil rights perspective. But it's always about fixing problems. You know, from potholes, bureaucratic snafus, civil rights snafus, fixing problems. That's what a public servant does. But remember, they're the public servant. We're the public masters because we vote, because they listen to us, because we exercise our right to franchise. Remember that. All right, tonight, the World Series. Are you watching? Have you given up? I mean, a lot of people think, oh, the World Series is so boring. I'm not going to watch the World Series. I'm just glad they're not playing in Atlanta where I got to watch the ridiculous tomahawk chop. Now I can just think about Houston, about how, my good old days when I was a young man playing rock and roll music in Houston. Anyway, good luck to the Astros as they try to make up. They got to win the next two games, right? They got to come back from 3-1. That would be somewhat historic. There only have been a handful of teams that have done it. And maybe the Astros are good enough to do it if their bats come alive. The pitching, I don't know. Where's the pitching? You can't throw out Zach Greinke every day. Goodness sakes. Anyway, all right, tomorrow we will talk about the elections. We'll talk about who won. I know it's going to be close in Virginia, but let's hope all the Asian American, the mayors, let's hope all those mayors I talked about win. And I'm talking about Puraval in Cincinnati. We're talking about Michelle Wu in Boston, Bruce Harrell in Seattle. Let's hope they win. And that'd be great. So follow me on Twitter at Emil Amok, EMILAMOK. That's where they have you can actually go on Twitter and you can see this show if you know how to figure out their viewer. See the replays at amok.com. AMOK. Amok. 2 p.m. Pacific Live. We're usually here. Sometimes a little early if you catch the Lanyap. Yeah, you can catch the Lanyap. I like to say, hey, be here, bang the gong now. Facebook, EmilGuillermo.media is where you find this. You know, I just got a phone with face recognition. My God, face recognition. With or without glasses, they recognize you. I mean, I'm just really amazed by that. And now I was just reading where Facebook is now going to kind of get rid of all its face recognition technology because of privacy concerns. I'm a little worried about that. I like the thumb or the fingerprint. I like face. Well, actually, thumb, finger. Someone can cut your thumb and they can put it in their pocket and they can steal your phone. Sure, you'd be out of finger, but somehow it doesn't make sense. But face recognition, I'm just floored by it. Anyway, so tomorrow we'll talk about the elections and see what happened. See if you exercise the power. Something tells me that some of you aren't going to. I hope you do. If there's an election in your town, I hope you do. All right, we've reached that point in the show We remember when we feel like, remember Brian Sue, right? Remember Brian, the on the American Airlines thing. He has this affliction because he just had brain surgery. His mother was saying, "Oh, he just wants to lash out. He thinks he's being attacked." Well, here's a question: after brain surgery, is your mindfulness impaired? This is a time to exercise extreme mindfulness. I always like the definition of mindfulness of Sharon Salzberg, who said, she was quoting a 9-year-old boy from Oakland, who defined mindfulness as, oh, it means I don't punch that guy in the face. That's right. Put on the brakes. You don't go amok. You become mindful. And when someone attacks you or someone makes you feel good, the way you address it is with self-love, self-compassion. So with that, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Till tomorrow, Emil Guillermo. Mahal Kita.